I think you have your attention on tonight's game.
Well, I do, and I just think that it's critical that the key defenders of the Bombers take control. I mean, they've been a bit off the last 3 to 4 weeks, and it shouldn't be the case. Last year they had the 10th rated defensive 50 in the comp, and they made adjustments. Went and got Benny Mackay. This year they've slipped from that ranking. They've gone further down the tree. Last 6 weeks they're rated 11th. They're better than that. Look at the talent in that back half. And I think tonight you just have to stand up and get the job done. They've conceded 102, 92 and 96 the last 3 weeks. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. I just don't want a repeat of 2023, and that's what we're all fearing, where they only won 3 of their last 10. 2 of those were against West Coast and North. Well, it's just sliding for me. It's just sliding that way, and I want one of their defenders to take a stand. It just needs one of them to stand up. I don't know whether Laverty can be that guy, but certainly Ridley and Mackay can be. So I just want to see tonight a performance that says you're not getting through here. You're not getting the game played the way you want to play it with chaos. Can they do it? I don't know, but someone needs to take a stand down back.
Good stuff. I'm just going to have a quick in the gun for Ollie Henry from Geelong. He comes back into the Geelong side. I think he's been well below his potential this year. I did love Geelong's forward line without Tom Hawkins last week. 11 individual goal kickers. Gary Rowan has given them something, but you're not going to be reliant on him because usually an injury will bob up somewhere or performance will wane with Gary. That's what the history would say. So he is the most talented young forward that they've got. Ollie Henry, just the 21 goals, I think it is, from his 13 games this year. He's better than that. He should be emerging as a breakout star, third tall option in the game. He's a player that's capable of kicking 45 to 50 for a year, and I just haven't seen that yet, despite the fact that he has threatened to do that. And I think he's far too good for the performances that he's shown this year. So I just want a big performance, a statement game, insert yourself into it. High impact, 3 or 4 goals, and I think he can do that in a pretty important game on Saturday down at Geelong.
Massive game, isn't it?
Massive
we'll
game.
Get to the games later on, but it's another round that just keeps on giving. And a bit of feedback for us here. That interview with Tomo went longer than the Andrew Gaze doco.
That only went 17 minutes. That's about standard.
Well, we don't get him often enough to let him go after 5.
No, we could have gone for longer.
Absolutely
could have. Graze.com is Australia's leading online marketplace. It's easy to buy and sell. Just quickly on the agenda, King, you don't want to get bogged down by this, but were you a little bit hard on the Hawks on Monday? You're not a believer.
I was asked whether I was a believer, and you have to say yes or no.
Are you? But
make it a headline.
I think you were judging them on whether they'd be there for prelim final weekend. That's a large jump from where they've been.
But that was the conversation.
But
you're taking an aspect of the conversation, not the discussion itself in isolation.
I read, yes, I wasn't listening, but I read the write-up on SEN.com. Is that why are we even judging them on whether they'd be there for prelim final? Wouldn't the response be, well, that's not really the conversation. The conversation is how much they've improved with their game and are they on track to be in a prelim final situation in a year or two's time?
Yeah, and if that was the conversation, well, you can...
Do you believe that then?
I still think they're a couple of players short. I still think they need a key back. Clearly, they've got one that is on the sidelines at the moment with a knee reco. I'm not sure that Sam Frost will be there when they're successful. I'm not sure that Weddle will be the centre half back when they're at that stage. So I still think there's a lot of improvement to come in this list and a lot of challenge to build this list before it's a prelim final.
Feedback? They're a passionate bunch, the Hawks.
I don't mind that. No, you're taking it out of context. How I said it was, are they preliminary final worthy this year was the question that came at me, and I said, no, I think there's still some holes.
You spoke about their stoppage work, and that's what's keeping their game together.
The stoppage work is brilliant, and it saves. If you win stoppage and keep it in your forward half, you protect so many other facets of your game that are just short. So you're not really putting that vulnerable or any vulnerabilities down back to the sword. So that was the discussion as to what they're actually doing.
You're not with me on the genius, I saw.
I'm not with you on the genius. Well, I just don't jump as quick as you do and try and ride it for 5 years.
2 years ago.
But you'll just flip like this anyway.
Just ahead of my time.
You'll just flip like that.
No, I won't.
Yes, you will. You walked in one day and said, I can see it, what you're talking about with the Suns.
No, well, that's in.
Yes, you did. After canning him for 3 years, said, no, I can see it now.
Of course,
all problems moved on.
Yeah, that was before they had 3 academy picks in the top 10. Of course, you got to change with that. Of course,
But
you've got to
that was
change
always
with
coming.
their list.
But that was always coming. That was the point.
Then you've
18 months ago, they knew they were
see
coming.
them just because they're
No, you don't.
on the line. You've got to actually see what they can
No,
deliver. There's
people
been a
who are
lot of
listening-
top 10 draft picks that are no good.
People who are listening today expect us to have done that research.
What,
To know what's coming.
Go and watch them
No,
at
just to-
under 18
no.
level and tell me if
Don't
they're
have to
going to
watch
be
them.
a 300-game player a year out.
You
I'm
personally,
I'm not a recruiter.
Well, let me answer your question. You personally don't have to watch them, but the club up there will tell you. We've got 4 guys walking in here. They're the top 20.
Of course they're going to say that, but they would have said the
No.
same thing about Paddy Dow when he was picked at pick 3. Of course the club's going to say
About Paddy Dow?
Well,
No, the 4 academy
Any
kids.
club that picks a player in the top 10 is going to say that they're good.
No, they're
That's why
saying
they're not picking them in the top 10.
you're not listening. They're getting 4 academy picks that they're going to pay logically pick 64 that they're going to get. They're getting nothing.
Doesn't
Get them
mean
for
that they're
nothing.
going to be any good. How would you
You know,
know? The
but-
draft is still somewhat of a lottery, isn't it? You've got to actually
Well, you've
see
got to
them
trust.
in
You've got to
action.
trust someone in the game, don't you? if
Well-
you don't trust anyone in the game, you're going to find it very difficult to get any
Well, you would have
information.
trusted North to nail Will Phillips with pick 3. Like they would have said Will Phillips is going to be a
So
star.
but you would have thought that there would be more logic talking to a recruiter about what you've got upcoming in terms of their academy and father sons than just a random pick in the draft. I'm not worried about one given player at one given pick. I'm saying you're going to get 4 free hits in next year's draft. That's a pretty good starting point.
Yeah, and when you see them in action, you go, okay, well, this is pretty scary for clubs that don't have the access that the Suns have had, wouldn't you?
I'm just saying if you can change your opinion one day when you see these guys,
Well,
then
Thingy,
maybe
3
it
weeks
doesn't
ago,
matter about
you
a
were
5
telling
year.
us to put our hand up and apologise to Adam Simpson, and now that would be flipped. So, well, I mean, that's another conversation.
But that's my point. My point is it's hard to project way down the track, right? But you've just got to trust what people tell you. So to walk in one day and say, oh, no, I see it with the Suns, we can't have that discussion every week. You can't do that every
I
year.
didn't have that every week. I had it once where I go, this is pretty frightening for the rest of the competition that doesn't have that access to the draft. I think that's a reasonable opinion.
You said I
to
see it
change.
now with the Suns. That was your exact words were, I now see it with the Suns.
And 3 weeks ago, you were telling us to put our hand up and apologise to Simo. Like,
Yeah, because you were trying to sack him halfway through the year, and
of
then they
course-
went and won a
of course-
couple of games.
Of course I was. And I
Yeah.
still am.
Still am trying to sack him.
Well, I think that that's the conversation. If you've been there for that long and you've lost 54 out of your last 62, there probably needs to be that conversation, wouldn't there? I'm not going to put my hand up and apologise for that.
No, but the point of sacking someone halfway through the year, what's to be gained from
I
that
said
was
it
the
like
discussion.
at the
and-
end of last year would have been the time, and the year before that, not necessarily just now. I think that.
Yeah, and that's an opinion. That's fine. I'm no problem with that opinion.
But I'm not going to apologise for it after
No, but
one win.
No, but trying to sack someone mid-year and then they actually do what the club's asking them to do in terms of rebuilding. So some coaches are not, they can't win you by making finals. Some of the coaches down the bottom of the table are on a different journey. They're on a different path. So you've got to assess them on that path. If he wins a game against the Melbourne, we'll give some credit. Give some recognition that, hey, well done or well coached or got within 10 points of this team or 20 points of that team. Give some credit.
61 points of Hawthorn. I'm not going to put my hand up and apologise. Anyway,
I'm not asking you to.
You said put your hand up and
Not
apologise.
today. You're picking and choosing here. You're
just saying
dancing all over the place. Just stick with the week we're talking
I
about.
started
right?
with Hawthorn. You went back to something I said about Gold Coast
Well, you
7
can't-
weeks ago, and
but you-
now we're on West Coast. So of course we're flipping. Like that's
Yeah,
what,
you're trying to sack him. I'm necessarily not trying to sack everyone. So that's a different discussion.
just
I'm
Kenny.
not-
Just Kenny. All right. Well, can we just break? Because I do want to hear what is on your agenda. You want to speak about? I want to ask.
You're
you.
emotional about Kenny. It's
I'm
upsetting.
not emotional.
He
at
won
all.
by 2 points, and you
emotional.
couldn't wait to get on Twitter
No.
and say, "Hey guys, who kicked 60 points?"
You're emotional about Simo.
I'm not emotional at all. I've
right.
told you my thoughts on Simo.
All right, for Aussies living life on the go, this is the sidetracked agenda. We got through 2.5 hours as we continue.
All part of the fun.
Continue the agenda. All right, Kingy, you have the Sydney Swans on your agenda.
I'm just wondering whether you're seeing anything with the Swans over the last couple of weeks. And as we said last night on the preview show for First Crack, you're not going to see things collapse or fall off the face of the earth. You're just going to see subtle changes, little things that just regress back to where the competition standards are at. And what we've seen from these three midfielders in particular, Warner, Heaney and Gordon, have been unbelievable. They've had a terrific season, and they all will be all Australian. And it would be kind of need if they all started as the starting three on ball to highlight how good they've been. But their counter-attack game, if you just take the forward 50 out of it and just talk about the midfield and the defensive 50, so the three-quarters or two-thirds of the ground, if you like, there has been a shift. Teams are now playing against them differently. They're taking away their uncontested mark game, and they're really honing in on their handball receive game. So they've dropped about 20-odd uncontested possessions a week. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but those uncontested possessions have a happy knack of ending up with Goulden, Heaney and Warner. So it's actually starting to turn. They're not getting as much power now on counterpunch as what they had the first. They've gone from number 1 for the first 10 rounds, slipped to number 9 for the last 6 rounds. So there is a shift. Now, how far this shift goes, or whether it's a short-term thing, is the challenge or the question. Are you seeing anything that is the initial stages of concern?
Well, what you're seeing is the competition is great at figuring other teams out. You've got 16 weeks of evidence of what Sydney have done well, so you get a lot of smart minds in the game thinking of ways and strategies to restrict that, and that's what Fremantle have done, and your numbers would highlight that. I think it was 63 uncontested marks or something very low on the weekend, and then the other teams go, okay, well, let's do that as well. It's a copycat league. So the only concern I've got is that other teams will go about that plan, put that in place and really challenge Sydney in that method, and then what is the response? Am I worried about them losing a game? No.
Not losing a game.
I understand. No. And did it come at a good time? Was it a little bit of a mini wake-up call for Brodie Grundy, who wasn't physical enough and was targeted? Was it a wake-up call for Heaney, who was targeted physically from Fife? The same with Warner and Goulden. I'm a little bit concerned about the lack of, at times, competitiveness from their key forwards. I mean, they often can just float through games. Logan McDonald and Amadi and McLean. There's slight concern there. Are they a touch undersized in defence, perhaps? But they're going to be their grand final day. I've got no concerns about that.
They're going to be there?
Yeah, they'll be their grand final day. And what happens from there on the MCG is anyone's guess. Last time they were there on grand final day, it wasn't a great day for them. So are there any scars there? I don't know, but
I'm just sensing that it's coming back, and the ladder's lying a little bit with the gap. I mean, they've banked their wins and they've got the gap, but it's a watch for me over the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Good watch, and it's a good watch to have. All right, I want to get to this because this was on your Dumb Shizen earlier, but I thought it was too good for Dumb Shizen. Here's Paul Roos again, who you've been rightly hot on this year, speaking about, well, footy in the 80s and how it sits in today's game.
Probably I suppose we can sound like old timers on this because that's what we're here for, but
yes,
there's certainly a lot more depth, and I don't know what it's like for you, Brandy, but there's a lot more depth in AFL. Like, we only had 12 teams, and like our seconds teams, and I say this, Carlton's seconds team in the early 80s would beat North Melbourne right now. There's no question about that. So I thought I played a reasonable first game, but I was dropped the next week, and I think I got back in the week after that. So you had to play at a pretty high standard to keep getting a game, because some of the guys that were running around the seconds had played 50, 100, 150 games of AFL football.
I had a look at the team firstly, the 86 Carlton Reserves team. So let me throw a few names at you because you've got to come with fact, Quincy. The grand final side.
I'm not going to recognise many of these names.
Yes, you don't reckon? You don't know who Stephen Silvani?
No, I recognise him.
Ken Sheldon.
Yep.
Adrian Gleeson.
Yep.
Rod Ashman. Warren Roth. Do you remember Spiro Corcomelis? Alex Marcoux.
No.
Peter Rode, you'd know.
Rhodey, yep. He was my footy manager at Port Adelaide.
Ian Aiken. So maybe there's some reasonable discussion to be had.
Win?
No, of course they wouldn't win. Look, I think the anger, the angst between Roosie and the Kangaroos fans is building because he keeps sort of throwing these little clips. Now, he might be right. He might actually be right with his 80s discussion versus now. Who knows? How can you tell? But the fact that it's at the Kangaroos, I think, hits the heart of the North fan, given that Paul was there for a couple of years and he's part of the reason. Now, you can come up with a percentage. It can be half of 1%. It can be 10%. I don't know. But he had a major say in David Noble getting the job as coach, who essentially was going for the CEO role when he first was mooted to move to North Melbourne. So I think you have to back off a little bit. Yeah, just accept that maybe the plight of the Kangaroos is not under Alistair Clarkson in the last 18 months. He's there because of that situation that Paul was part of. So I think there's some frustration there. I don't really want to get into a war with. I'm sick of feuds. I don't really want to get into any spat with Roosie, but I do think he needs to back off the Kangas a little.
All right.
Do you agree with that?
I love it. Yeah, I think it's a reasonable, balanced response that you have given consistently throughout the year, and I think most Kangaroos fans would agree with you. But I do like it when you're in a feud.
I'm not in a feud at the moment.
No, you're not.
I'm in a good space.
But I loved it when you were feuding with Mark Duffield earlier on in the year. I thought that was a good one.
Duff dropped off pretty quick.
Gossage just got a text from Gossage.
I think he blocked me.
Speaking of West Australian media personalities, Gossage has texted that he's 10 days sober.
Good on him.
From Twitter.
Good on him.
So he's 10 days. I give it another 20 and he'll be back.
August was our over-under. Hey, what do you do with Nick Watson? I just had a close look at Nick Watson. He's kicked 6 goals, 17, and 5 complete misses.
Yep.
So that's 6 of 28. And between the 30 to 50 from goal, he's 3 goals, 12 with 2 that didn't score.
You know
so 3 goals
from
from 17.
Keep going. Keep having a ping. It will
you keep going. Just keep.
That's what I say to him. I know he's doing the work. So there's been Twitter clips all over the place of those that have been watching Hawthorn training of how much work he and Sam Mitchell have been putting into it. So keep having a ping.
Trust those people you're listening to.
No, I've seen the vision. There's been there's been clips repeatedly in the last few weeks of those two working hard on the goal kicking. He's too skillful for it not to turn. He was picked there for a reason. And I just say to him,
it's alarming though, isn't it?
If you're in position, keep having a crack, wizard. Cal Twomey is his name. I'm calling him that from now on. Welcome to the show, mate. Appreciate it.
G'day, Kane. Why is that?
Well, people think my accent affects your name when I call you Cow, which they think it sounds more like the animal than your first name. So I thought, respectfully, I'm not going to say that anymore. Hey, let's talk about the draft and how it's shaping up, and if there is a standout number 1 pick right now. If so, who is it?
No, there isn't, and that's what's interesting about this year's pool, particularly in difference to last year where we know that the number 1 pick was there for 2 years. Josh Smiley went into the championships being probably viewed as the more consensus number 1. He's been solid for Vic Metro. Finn O'Sullivan, the big contender for the number 1 pick, if he gets firing in the latter stages of this year, expect him to play for Big Country on the weekend against the Allies. He's only played 2 or 3 games this year through a couple of annoying hand and finger injuries, so he's still a chance. But you ask clubs, and everyone has a little bit of a split view on this year. So Luke Trainer's another one that's been mentioned from some clubs. Levi Ashcroft, of course, might well be in that group, but as a father-son, we don't expect him to get bid on there. So it's an open field and there for the taking, which, of course, then has implications for the team that has the number 1 pick. If it is North at the end of the year, can you split it? Is it worth splitting? And for the other clubs, is it worth paying more to get up to get that one player?
Which was my next question. So, I mean, what sort of deal do you think would be on the table for North? Like, what is the number 1 pick worth? Is it 2 inside 10 but towards the back end, or is it 2 first-round picks but later on? Or how do you value it in this pool?
I think if you're moving back from number 1, you still would like a pick inside the top 5 and another one inside the top 12.
Yep.
That's generally, I think, the way you'd look at it. And there is a top group of like 5 or 6 players at that top end. But I'm really excited by this draft because I'm doing my rankings at the end of the championships in about a week and a half. And just going through the names, I get to 25 names really, really quickly. And that's probably a little bit different to the last couple of years. I think the evenness is really, really strong and exciting as well. A bit of a different feel to the group. It's a midfielders group at the very top end, but we're seeing a few talls come into things during the carnival. So I think there's going to be a discussion around that, but how much clubs are actually willing to pay to get up will be another thing if they think it's very even right at the top end.
Cal, where are we at with Chad Warner? Is there any movement up there north of the border?
Well, King, it's an interesting one. I mean, he's contracted to the end of next year, and that hasn't stopped the West Australian clubs from being interested. Reported a couple of weeks ago on Gettable that there's been direct contact between both clubs and Warner. So they're not sitting on their hands, and nor should they be. I don't expect anything to happen this year in terms of contract extension or a move, but I think it's sort of planting the seeds ahead of 2025.
Couple of questions here just coming up on the text. Logan McDonald, anything to report there?
My gut feel through the whole period has been that he ends up staying. Sydney don't lose many. I mean, we look at Jordan Dawson as being one. I think if it was to move, I still have Fremantle as being, the leading contender if it was to move and he was to move back to Western Australia. Collingwood's obviously got interest and been linked, but I still feel like the most likely option is to stay. He's got 4 years through to free agency. I reckon that'd be a good chance of happening.
Jack Lukosius?
2 years to go on his contract. No movement at the moment. I think now that he's playing forward, there's probably a different conversation around it. If you're still in the back half, I would have been interested to see where it played out more at the end of the year. But Adelaide's cashed up, and they've been into a lot of players and having a crack. So he's obviously got the South Australian links. The difference between him and a lot of the players that they have looked at is, as I said before, he's got a 2-year contract. So you'd actually have to give up something pretty decent for it to happen. And Gold Coast isn't pushing him out by any means.
Just with the Saints and the potential compensation for Josh Battle, with what's been speculated, Cal, they'd have to let him go, wouldn't they?
It's a bit of a different one, this Kane, because he's an unrestricted free agent. I've seen him described as a restricted free agent. It's very, very different. So he's an unrestricted free agent, which means you don't get the chance to match. So in different scenarios over recent years, there's always been the threat of matching and forcing a trade if the money's not at a certain level, which would sort of guarantee a really good pick. Don't have that sort of power with an unrestricted free agent. So it's a little bit of a different case. In saying that, Hawthorn has 6 years on the table. St Kilda has 6 years there as well. Melbourne's been interested as well, but I think they're probably behind the pack on those ones. It's going to take a deal of close to 900 to register a first-round pick compensation for Battle.
Okay.
Look, the market is there for the tall types, and we know the value placed on the UFA status.
What if Dustin Martin left for 900 a year for 2 years to the Gold Coast Suns? What would that return give the Tigers?
2 years, total 900 or 900 per year?
Well, let's fatten the pig a little bit and see where it takes us. What would 750 a year give?
One, I don't think the Suns would be paying that. But let's play the game. I don't think it'd be getting more than maybe an end of second round pick because age is a big factor in the Formula 2 King. And what is he, 33 at the end of the year? So, I don't think that would generate too much of an early selection for him in that case. But either way, I don't think the money is going to be at that level if he does move.
Let's stay with the Tigers and speak about Liam Baker. What do the West Australian clubs value him at in terms of a pick in exchange for him? Is it late first round? How do you value that?
Freo has 3 first-round picks, and that's why one of the reasons why they're well and truly in the fight. They can get it done a lot easier than West Coast can. He's obviously very interested in the move to potentially go back. He was very interested 2 years ago as well to potentially go back and met with both clubs then. And all clubs, including the Tigers, have longer-term deals on the table for him. For West Coast, it becomes a harder situation, though, doesn't it? And given they, at the moment, hold pick 3, I think you wouldn't want to be splitting pick 3 to get Liam Baker in as a sort of 26, 27-year-old, given he's 1 year away from free agency. So that makes it harder. Does the Tom Barrass situation actually open the door potentially? Like, if Bailey Smith leaves for a first-round pick at the Bulldogs and then the Bulldogs have a first-round pick to offer up to West Coast for Tom Barrass, and then does that pick then turn into something they could use for Liam Baker? You have to think of all the scenarios. But in terms of who's armed with what, Fremantle's selections are a lot more in the right spot, I'd say, for what Baker's worth. Like they have the Collingwood's pick and Port Adelaide's pick as well as their own.
Outstanding, comprehensive as always, mate. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we appreciate you joining us this morning on Fireball Friday.
Thanks, Cal.
Good on you, gents.